Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to Rigging 101. This is chapter 0.1. Going to be going over joints for this. And joints are one of the most basic and fundamental parts of rigging, if not the most fundamental. Because joints are how we influence the geometry to make it deform. Now, what do we mean by influence the geometry? Well, we spend all this time making our model, and we have a piece of geometry, usually polygons is what we end up with. And let's say I want to be able to make this move. Now, if I just need this whole piece to move as in the same shape, I can just place keys on this, right? So you can see I've placed 2 keys on this. I have it moving up and down on the y-axis, and that works. But what if I want it to bend in the middle, which is what we call deformations? Now, in order to do that, I technically speaking need these vertexes on this side, right? Going to vertex mode. So I need these vertexes to spin up and around this way. And I need these vertexes to actually stay put. And then these ones over here in the middle, they would need to rotate more or less depending on where they were. These ones would obviously move farther. These ones would move less far. So how do I accomplish this? Well, you cannot place keys on individual vertexes. Besides being just completely ridiculous amount of work, you cannot place keys on a component. Vertexes, faces, edges, CVs, these are things that make up objects, and we cannot place keys directly on them. We can only place keys directly on an object. So we need to connect an object to this geometry such that we will be able to control deformations. And that's where joints come in. Joints are objects. So we can put keys on them, and they can be made to attach to a piece of geometry and deform said geometry. Right? So I select this joint, and you can see it's putting a bend right in this arm. And there is actually a way for me to show the influence. There we go. So if I select this middle joint right here, you can see that black is no influence, white is all influence. So you can see that these vertexes are being influenced the most. It's the lightest color. They're coming up this way. And these ones are black. They're not being influenced at all by this joint. And if we take a close look here, you can see that there's all these various shades of gray. So these ones are lightest, so they will move the most actually when I rotate this. And these ones are darker, and they will move the least. And so you can watch, let me turn on a wireframe here. And as I rotate this joint, you can see they're stretching out. These are not the best painted weights, so they're not quite too nice. But you can see that these are stretching out, right? Kind of like skin stretching over an elbow or over a knuckle, because these vertexes are moving more than these. And so that's what we use joints to do. Alright, so that's what joints do and why we need to learn them. So how do we create them? Well, first off, you need your animation menu set. And then pretty much everything for rigging is going to be found in these 5 menus right here, both for deformers, skeleton, skin, constraint. You also have your animation tab right here for those that prefer the shelf. But you can go to skeleton, joint tool, and the joint tool is not unlike the curve tool in that if you try to draw something helpful in the perspective view, you get this. They will only initially draw the joints on 2 of the axes, and they will ignore the 3rd. So we always draw our joints in the orthographic view. So I'm going to draw just what a typical leg would be. I don't actually have a model here yet. Alright, we hit enter when we're done. So you click where you want there to be joints, hit enter when you're done, and you get what's called a joint chain. Alright, and there's 2 distinct parts to this. The round bits right here, these are the actual joints. Oops. So that is the part that you will be almost always rotating. Certainly I can't think of any time to scale them, and there are some instances where you will be actually moving them like this, translating them. But mostly you will be rotating your joints. And you can see what happens is that as I go down the joint chain, I'm affecting less and less joints, right? So that's the ball of the foot, and when I rotate that, I only get the toe following. But if I rotate the knee, everything beyond it follows. Now, these joints are being connected by these triangles. They're actually more like pyramids in the 3D view. They're called bones, and we don't, in Maya anyways, you don't select these separately. They're more just there to show you how these joints are connected, what direction they're running in. So for example, I know that this joint is controlling all of these, and that's what this sort of, it's wider up here and pointier down here. It's pointing down the joint chain. And in our hypergraph, all right, we can see what this looks like. Now, joints are each individual objects. Remember I said before that we can only put keys on objects, we cannot put keys on components. So in order for this to work, each and every joint has to be its own object. That way we can place keys on it. So you can see why naming these might be a very good idea, because once you get an entire skeleton in here, you're going to have just so many different pieces going on that you're going to have a really hard time sort of telling them apart. All right, so there we go. Normally these would be labeled left and right because we have usually 2 legs. Okay, so we can see the joint chain going down, and some of you might notice that this looks an awful lot like parenting, because that's exactly what it is. This hip bone or joint is a parent of this one, is a parent of this one, etc., etc. So a joint chain, you have everything going down the joint chain. So this toe controls nothing. It is a child. It has only parents. It has no children of its own. All right, and we can actually connect things back and forth the same way we would with parenting, right? So when you're in the hypergraph and you middle mouse drag this piece, this node, off of the joint chain, it separates, and you can see back here that now this joint is no longer parented to this joint. I could rotate this knee all I want and nothing will follow. I could rotate the hip. These are now separate, right? Because I've no longer got them parented. I can select the child and then the parent over here, hit P on the keyboard, and I get my joint chain back. So this isn't kind of like parenting, it is parenting. That's exactly what it is. Okay, so if we have joints and they act as child and parent and things like that, one of the things that we can consider is that a joint can actually have 2 children, and there are a couple of places on a normal human rig where you would have that. The most obvious being on the back, where you have the one back would split off into 2 legs, and the upper back would also split off to the lower back and both arms, so you'd actually have 3 children. All right, so the easiest way to actually set this up, excuse me, the easiest way to actually set this up is to simply select both children, and don't be weirded out that the whole joint chain selects. You can watch your hypergraph to know exactly what's selected. But you select what are both going to be children, and then you shift select this back joint, which will be the parent, and you hit P on the keyboard. And you can see what it did to the hypergraph right here. It's now got 2 different chains running underneath this one back joint. And that's pretty typical. You're going to find this all the time in your rig. Now, something to keep in mind is that one parent can have multiple children, but one child cannot have multiple parents. And what that means in practical circumstances is, and I don't know where this would happen in a human body, but if I was to try and parent this hip also to this new joint, you can see it switches off there. You can see in the hypergraph it jumped to this other joint, and it is no longer part of our usual hierarchy. It's no longer part of our usual joint chain. So you can never have 2 parents, but you can always have many, many children, basically. Alright, so I can child, parent, hit P on the keyboard, switch that back, and get rid of my extra joint. The other thing to keep in mind is not that just directly this joint can only have 1 parent, but going up the chain, this joint can only have 1 eventual top parent. Meaning this one over here cannot connect back to here. I cannot take this, last joint over here and then have it be the parent of this. You cannot have any circular logic going on with joints or any parenting ever. Basically, anything that can show up in your hypergraph hierarchy, right? Because we have two different hypergraphs, the one that says hierarchy. Anything that shows up in here must have an ultimate top node, something on top, and must have ultimately an end to the chain. In this case, there's multiple ends to the chain, but there's only one top piece. You can never have circles where one thing feeds into A, feeds into B, feeds into C, feeds into A. And that's why it's called hierarchy, because there's always something that's, bigger and giving orders to all of the other things below it.